In Zanzibar, Stone Town was declared to be World Heritage in 2000. But it wasn't in fact a stone town until colonial officers in the early 20th century started to expel Africans who were living in between the stone houses in mud huts with straw roofs. They wanted to get rid of what they regarded as insanitary, where the garbage collected, and so they moved African buildings across the lagoon into this neighborhood called Ngambo, that is now the buffer zone of World Heritage in Zanzibar. Basically moving the descendants of the slaves, the working class people, into another neighborhood so they wouldn't be, so the elite, including the British officers, wouldn't be bothered by their presence. So in a way, the declaration of Stone Town as World Heritage was built on a history of exclusion. And the notion of heritage that was enshrined in a way by choosing that 19th century moment in which these buildings were first put up, these stone buildings were first put up, by declaring it to be that which you want to conserve and not thinking about, for example, the way of life of these African laborers that were moved across the lagoon. Now the new approach, including the historic urban landscape approach, in fact tries to redress some of that by taking a much broader view of what an urban landscape is, and including the intangible heritage also of the the working class people who live in that neighborhood. And who also built up, also from the 19th century onwards, quite impressive cultural features. A major example, for example, is that neighborhood, Ngambo, was the source of a very popular music style in the 20th century called Taarab, developed interestingly by largely female members of that working class culture. And those are the kinds of things that the historic urban landscape approach tries to first elicit and then maybe give some kind of shape in the new design of the neighborhood. If you think of other examples, then you can see that heritage itself can at least be seen as exclusive. There's the famous example of the Bamiyan Buddhas that were destroyed by the Taliban. And many people think that the Taliban were acting from a kind of traditional Islam, right? Hating the fact that other religions built images of living people like the Buddha, and therefore wanting to destroy them. But if you read what someone like Mullah Omar, who was the leader of the Taliban in Afghanistan at that time, said about these things, he was actually acting against a global discourse on museums and heritage. He didn't like the fact that these idols, these became secular idols as in essentially a museumized world. And so the Taliban was, in that sense, modern enough to see that the secular discourse on heritage was represented by these Buddhas in a way that didn't respect their own point of view. So they felt, at least, that museums and heritage, by declaring the Buddhas to be World Heritage, did not take sufficient account of their own point of view. If you look at both of these parties together, then one of the interesting things of recent research by an Indian professor called Kavita Singh is that both parties forgot completely about the people who actually live in that valley where the Bamiyan Buddhas used to be, who had their own stories about their own intangible heritage, about the Buddhas and why they were valuable and how they identified with them, which neither the Taliban nor the World Heritage discourse respected.